Tobacco. It's often called the single most important shamanic, spiritual, ceremonial plant cross-culturally within the Americas and perhaps even outside of that too. So help us understand why that might be the case. What's your understanding of tobacco being so revered, of it being considered so sacred?
I wish I knew. There's such a mysterious component around tobacco. I mean, I have stories and suppositions and speculations and there's different ways we can take it, you know? I mean, the native people throughout the Americas have a kind of ubiquitous, overarching attribution of tobacco as coming straight from the creator, as being an emissary of the creator. And there's different myths in the North than in the South, but they all kind of have this overarching theme that the creator of all things gifted tobacco to people so that people could be in touch with the creator. And you know, I don't particularly know how it plugs in to other global cultures, because what I do know is that when tobacco was carried from South America around the world to Africa, to Australia, to Asia, to Europe, peoples everywhere received it, and shamanic peoples immediately picked it up as if it were their own, and they had known it since the beginning of their time. And there's a lot of stories of this, the way that tobacco was immediately adopted by shamanic cultures around the world, and it was recognized as penultimate or as vitally important or central. And so there is some general recognition of that, it seems like, from varied indigenous cultures, even cultures that are not from the Americas.
Sure.
From my understanding of it, in the way that I engage with tobacco, because I don't come from, you know, an indigenous cosmology and culture, the tobacco plugs into plants, trees, animals, soil, and opens connection in a way that's profound. And I've experimented a lot with it in a way that seems somewhat irreplaceable. Like tobacco is a fundamental part of a piece of creation architecture, or whatever it is that tobacco holds and embodies, whatever tobacco guards, seems to be a fundamental part of creation, given that there are nicotine receptors in basically everything alive. And, you know, does that corroborate kind of some of the indigenous stories and the indigenous wisdom about the importance of tobacco? I don't know. That's where it comes back to a mystery. I really don't know. But I do know the utility of tobacco when doing shamanic practice and shamanic work, for being able to open and access what one is intending to open and access, whether that be like high channels of prayer, so getting to the sky, or if one is opening and accessing the life stream of other master plants, trees, etc., or ancestry through human beings. The tobacco also has this capacity to open the lines, the lifelines within human beings. And so the way I describe it in general is I see tobacco as opening the soul stream of a human and opening the soul stream of whatever else it is that you're attempting to bridge or connect to, and the tobacco acts as an ambassador.
Yeah, when you said that tobacco can plug into other plants and other trees, I'd love for you to tease this idea apart. And I suspect that you're talking about something to do with tobacco's evolutionary intelligence across species, because as you alluded to, as mammals, us humans, we're not the only species that have nicotine receptors and that can receive tobacco.
Yeah, sure. I mean, there's well documented research around tobaccos, particularly the nicotine receptors in um, the animal kingdom as well as in the plant kingdom. And there's some supposition that it's there in single-celled organisms, fungi. Of course, we can't go and test everything living, so it's impossible to prove that everything alive has nicotine receptors in it.
Mhm.
But there's enough evidence to suggest that tobacco's um, distribution of nicotine may be universal throughout biology, um, and throughout the kingdom of life. And that's where I trail off. I do not understand that mystery. But I guess to launch into another maybe aspect of that story, there are a lot of tales, old tales of tobacco as relating to a web.
A web.
A web, yeah. Like a web of creation.
Mhm.
And the way that I understand tobacco is that the plant itself, or the spirit that is imbued within the plant, is a spirit that is older than creation. And the spirit within tobacco is akin to some incarnation of the creator. And it is the male side of the creator. And the web of tobacco is like the structure, like some fundamental piece of the architecture in the created world. And I believe that that's probably the quantum field that's there in tobacco, and that life is a nested web within the quantum web.
Sure.
And that tobacco holds that architecture. And then through these webs, of course, creation is manifest, and that's the feminine counterpart. So I see it in my practice in a way that this aspect of tobacco, yes, you can do many things with it shamanically, but when it comes down to how do we engage that, what is our spiritual connection to that, tobacco to me seems to be a karmic teacher, a teacher of the web of the Maya, right? Of the web of illusion and creation, the web of karma, the wheel of life. And that is what I've observed in my practice, carrying tobacco around the world. Yes, there are these incredible shamanic components where you can utilize tobacco to plug into species. I particularly use it to plug into tree species all over the world. And it has this utilitarian function of being like a skeleton key to be able to plug in and open up the life stream of a tree. But what is the tax for that tool, in a way?
What is the tax? Okay. Yeah. What is the tax?
Acceleration of karma. So tobacco is a karmic teacher. So to utilize tobacco and to be in right relationship to tobacco and work with tobacco as a master plant, as a master shamanic technology, the plant or the spirit within the plant has the potential to accelerate one's karma or one's illusion.
The how and the why of this all working, it seems like perhaps it will forever be part of the mystery to various degrees, and the mythologies and the cosmologies of tobacco from ancient times to now. It's all so interesting. And perhaps we can continue laying more of this foundation for what we mean when we say tobacco is a sacred plant teacher. And maybe one of the ways that we can help to continue contextualizing this is contrasting it with how it differs from everyday tobacco use. And I suspect most of our audience who are tuning in, they'll have some understanding of this, but I feel as though it's important context to lay nonetheless.
In the way I understand it and in the way I walk with tobacco, and this is a murmuring that I kind of receive from the spirit of tobacco, that as long as tobacco is walked with as a form of prayer, then all will be right, or all will be well. And like, well, what is prayer? It may have something to do with opening oneself to the whole, or to the greatness of the whole, and being revealed before creation, or being honest, being naked, being true, being transparent, and being honest in one's spirit. And the tobacco, when we are there, the tobacco opens this whole path of access and possibility to accelerate illusion and break it, or pierce it, or penetrate it, or unwind it, and then to come back into our sovereign creative power. We can also utilize tobacco as a creative agent, because the medicine of tobacco is a massively mysterious shamanic potential, and shamanic webs can be created with tobacco. That was very likely the old architectural ley lines of Mesoamerican cosmology from the northern to southern tribes. Those lines were very likely laid by tobacco, in the way that they traded, the way they traded ideas, the way that they intermarried, the way that they exchanged language, and it created very likely a cultural web that was where peace and order was somewhat kept by exchange of tobacco. And it's possible to utilize the tobacco also in a way that is dark or manipulative, because this power is within the plant. And it's so fascinating. I'm just like, I can't even believe it sometimes to talk about it. But the American empire was founded on tobacco.
Yeah, you mentioned this to me last time we spoke.
Right. And so it's, we're tracking something. It's going down the rabbit hole of like, what is right relationship to this plant? What is misuse of this plant? First, it's like you have to talk about the power that's within it. All of the signers of the Declaration of Independence were wealthy tobacco farmers, and so owned thousands of acres of tobacco fields. And going back before them, all of the attention from England into the Americas was around the Virginia colony, where a form of tobacco had been, a form of curing of tobacco had been invented. That was considered superior to the tobacco you could get from Cuba, or from the other colonies, or from South America, or the tobacco that was being grown natively in Europe and that had been imported, in the 1500s, right? And so by the time you have the 1700s, there's this hyper-focused, very refined form of tobacco curing coming out of the Virginia colony. And the level of wealth that was being generated there was intense. And it was the focus of all of the colonial powers and their interest in America. It was this economy being created around tobacco.
Mm-hmm.
So much so that the first dollar, essentially, in these colonies was a tobacco note. It was a tobacco promissory note. So it was a note not backed by gold, but backed by tobacco poundage. So you could claim it for 5 pounds of tobacco or 10 pounds of tobacco. And Virginia tobacco had become standardized. And so this weaves a web all around the world, right? This Virginia tobacco is going all around the world, weaving this web. Slaves are being bought in West Africa for the tobacco because the tobacco is so valuable. It could be traded for money, for any other good, or for people. It was that valuable.
Mm-hmm.
In this economy, this mercantile economy that was created. And all of those lines that were being created at that time are the lines that laid globalization. So this plant has had this role in laying these lines of globalization. And it's like, well, whoa, is that nefarious? Is there some nefarious spirit in tobacco? No, I don't believe that. But there is a poison in tobacco. And that poison can be utilized for whatever you want. Whatever you want. If you're skilled enough and you can control it, you can utilize the poison in tobacco. And it's the brujos or the warlocks and witches and those shamans of South America and the Amazon that learn the art of shamanism to harm other people and to do selfish acts will utilize tobacco just as much as those who cure. So the plant has a poison. Go ahead, brother.
Yeah, that's really interesting to think about tobacco and a lot of these master plants as having their own agency, their own spirit, their own consciousness. And there's an interesting conversation to be had around whether these particular sacred plant teachers and medicines have their own particular agenda. And then we find this convergence of the way that we as humans relate with these plants and our evolutionary linear path and where it's taken us in this context to our modernized relationship with tobacco, which is, we look around, it's very, very unhealthy, it's very unconscious. And then contrasted with these, as you say, I like that word that you used before, the penultimate, the most sacred ways of relating with tobacco. I don't know if I have anything to add of value to that, but it's an interesting point to consider.
They all have a spirit, and tobacco is an enormously powerful spirit. And so that's a part of working with tobacco. And tobacco does have a trickster within the spirit. This is part of the canon of Mesoamerican myths around tobacco. Almost always include some kind of trickster. And a lot of the myths around how tobacco was acquired include some kind of archetypal trickster myth, like Prometheus stealing fire from the gods, Prometheus being considered a trickster, tricking the gods in order to get access to the fire and bringing it back to humans. There's a number of myths that are well documented around tobacco. It's the archetype of that myth. So some hero tricking the gods or tricking a very powerful being that is guarding or hoarding tobacco, getting the tobacco like the fire and bringing it back to the people. And so the tobacco has a spirit. It's its own spirit. It's a very powerful spirit. And if you don't respect that spirit, the trickster will teach. The trickster will teach. And the trickster can teach in all kinds of strange ways. And it's dealing with a trickster spirit is very interesting. The northern native people talk about it as the coyote spirit. And it is like a spirit that's trying to distract you from the center or pull your attention away from focus or what's important. And it's interesting because a lot of the way that tobacco addiction works people go to it to focus, to sharpen, because nicotine is such a sharpening agent. It has this quality of being a sharpener of one's nervous system. And so it can focus you and help you stay focused. I would say that's one of the main functions it has for shamans in ayahuasca culture, is to stay focused in long, intoxicating ceremonies. So you smoke tobacco and you stay focused. Same when you're working, you're doing these long shifts of work and you can smoke tobacco. They give it to soldiers still in droves because nicotine sharpens you. But if you treat it like that, there's this aspect of the tobacco that will come in and tie your shoelaces together and take you away from that focus, because it's something needs to balance itself in the constellation, so to speak. It's like, okay, what is it to come back into right relationship of tobacco? We have to acknowledge its power, and that it is a spirit that has that a spirit is imbued in the plant that has an enormous sense of sovereignty and will. And when you work with tobacco, you are allying with that spirit. You're not just using a plant. And tobacco, when walked with well, is a great friend. Is a friend and a teacher and an elder, a grandfather, and is a teacher of following one's path in humility and in prayer. And to stay focused above all else on that.
Yeah, and we're touching upon the ever important themes here of appropriate contextualization, ritual approach, right relationship, and this multidimensionality. I was calling it the dual nature of tobacco, and I don't know if it's even dual nature because there's so much in between. But just for the sake of simplifying it for now, this dual nature of tobacco being both the healer, the teacher, and also the poison, and the one that can lead to addiction. And it can be so easy to demonize our modern relationship with tobacco and to romanticize indigenous ways of relating to tobacco. And we spoke about this very briefly when we had our initial conversation, that it's not necessarily all sacred right relationship in indigenous cultures either. And there can certainly, within this tendency to romanticize a lot of traditional practices, it's probably worthwhile speaking into how some indigenous folk do still or have come to these unhealthy, unconscious relationships with tobacco, and how there's been a loss of this sacred relationship due to how many factors. Colonial introduction, for one, of the mass-produced commercial tobacco, other modern ideas, principles, practices that have made their way into indigenous contexts. And there has been a shift from this reverence to addiction and disconnection. And I brought up that book when we first talked, Tobacco and Shamanism in South America by Joannis Wilbert. And for our audience that's listening, this is a pretty comprehensive anthropological book on tobacco use in South American indigenous cultures, which really highlights tobacco's role in shamanic practices and its, as you were speaking to, its significance as a bridge between the physical and the spiritual realms. But then also, as I was saying, from memory, it brings attention to some of the addictive and unconscious relationships that some of these indigenous folk have with tobacco. And we often think about tobacco addiction in terms of the mind-body complex, becoming addicted to nicotine. But I've heard you speak about the nature of tobacco addiction from a different kind of angle, in terms of it being linked to some sort of oral fixation. So that might be interesting to kind of tease apart as well.
Yeah, man. I mean, I think anywhere you find a lot of tobacco, you're going to find tobacco addiction. I don't care what culture it is. I think you're going to find tobacco addiction wherever there's a lot of tobacco. But that's the era we're living in. I don't care where in the world you are, we're living in a consumer time. That's going to be in indigenous cultures too. It's not really anybody's fault. It's not really tobacco's fault either. It's something goes back to what I was speaking about with the web and karma and the web of Maya. It's a time where humanity is dealing with a very deep and profoundly driven desire to escape the present and to escape truth and to escape the experience of truth in the present and to cover up and hide and so but we have a gazillion things we can do this with. So when you put it in that context, tobacco is not unique. Tobacco is another thing you can misuse. You can misuse sugar, you can misuse alcohol, you can watch pornography and misuse sex. All of these things, what is that? All of these things have a lot of power. So we're using things that have a lot of power, and we're drinking the poison to try to numb how much we feel away from ourselves and how far we feel from ourselves. And it does get into the nature of what is poison. Well, it is, strong medicines have a poisonous side to them. So we're trying to medicate ourselves. We're trying to medicate ourselves. And if you dip your hand back into the history of human beings, even just at an imaginary level, it's not hard to imagine this. Cultures all over the world come from shamanic realities. And shamanic medicine is different than modern allopathic medicine, which tries to make people functional in society to perform. And shamanic medicine at its core is trying to crack people's bodies open to have the deeper capacity to experience and to hold experience, or to hold life force, to hold life power. And we need that in order to heal. But we're going back to these substances, whether it's tobacco or whether it's alcohol or whether it's any other drug or substance or powerful experience, peak experience, to even watching pornography as a peak experience. We're dipping back into it to try to connect to life force that we feel disconnected from. And so I don't think tobacco is unique in that way. I think we're doing it all over the world with everything. I think if our cultures were a bit more aligned with the experience of truth and what it is to go through pain and experience difficulty within ourselves as a way to transmute where we're calcified and blocked and where we become rigid and where we're rejecting life, I would think we would find a lot more ease with the medicine of tobacco, which is, you asked about different applications of it. So the old way to learn tobacco or to utilize tobacco as a medicine, as I understand it, is through the mouth into the stomach. So whether you can just imagine how this was discovered, people probably ate the leaf. And people probably ate the leaf for a long time before they smoked it. So the old ways of working with tobacco were probably then drying the leaf and holding it in pouches and eating it, carrying it around, likely before there was cookware. I mean, it's such an ancient relationship that people have with the tobacco. I think the oldest seeds that we've found in satchels are something like close to 20,000 years back. And it's very rare that we find digs or sites that are 20,000 years old. So it's quite likely the tobacco culture is a lot older. But through the mouth into the stomach, when you take the tobacco this way into the stomach, its addictive qualities are at its lowest. And so there's a physiological a shot at being in the right balance with tobacco, essentially, when you eat it or you put it in the stomach. Even if you're drinking a tea, which is very purgative, I don't recommend that anybody go and brew tobacco and drink a tea, unless you're in a ceremonial space with a highly trained facilitator. That puts you in a space where you're guarded against the addictive qualities of tobacco. And what is that? It's like when you shoot it up your nose as hape, or when you smoke it, these are the most addictive tobacco practices. Very likely because nicotine goes straight through the blood-brain barrier and it goes straight into your head. So it will absorb through your mouth right into your brain, right through the sinuses, right into the brain. When you eat it, it has to go through your liver. And so it goes into the liver, and the liver starts to break down and process the nicotine immediately. So it has a very strong effect on the organs to drink it or to eat it. But it starts to teach your body, what do you do with this wild plant? What do you do with the energy from this wild plant? How do you digest the energy of this wild plant? And so first off the bat, to come into right relationship with tobacco, the best thing that can be done is to learn with someone or to go to a tobacco ceremony where you're drinking it or eating it in some way. And then purging. So when you eat enough tobacco or you drink enough tobacco, it will cause you to vomit. And so the old way of training pipes in the jungle, the old way of training hape pipes or training smoking pipes, is to drink it enough times to where your body has learned how to metabolize tobacco and hold it not up here, but down here.
Yeah.
It becomes like a shamanic qigong that you're doing with the plant by learning how to hold its energy low. So it doesn't lift you up, hold you down.
Sure.
It grounds you, and you're holding it in your solar plexus in your stomach. And so I am careful with ways that are teaching and passing tobacco that don't incorporate that. And that, what you were speaking to earlier on with, maybe indigenous cultures that have gotten out of right relationship to tobacco, in my very unauthorized opinion and perspective, if the tobacco is not being eaten or drank in a ceremonial way, it's very easy to get out of right relationships with tobacco. If I smoke tobacco too much, and I have worked with this plant for a long time in sacred context and in full body shamanic works, through all the orifices, I can get out of right relationship smoking too much tobacco outside of ritual context. It can still pull me out. And I have such a deep relationship with this plant.
Yeah.
But I'm still vulnerable to it.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's plenty of people that smoke several packets of cigarettes a day, and we don't need to talk about all of the poisonous additives that are in commercial cigarettes. But good luck drinking a liter of tobacco or 2 liters of tobacco tea or eating a whole jar of tobacco paste. That's not going to end very well at all. And
It'll
you were
probably
talking,
kill you.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, you were talking about these differences in preparations, and I'd love to go down this route and then start to tease apart some more of the diverse cultural uses or shamanic uses, medicinal ways of approaching tobacco and what tobacco can offer us in that regard. But you mentioned the snuff through hape, but then there's also liquid, which can be taken through the nostrils. It can be smoked, chewed, topical, perhaps, but paste as well. And my introduction to tobacco as a master plant was with the late great ascended maestro Don Howard Lawler. I don't know if you're familiar with him or not, but he introduced tobacco as a sacred plant teacher to me roughly a decade ago. And actually, I
Mm.
never mentioned to you when we first talked that after returning from Peru all those years ago, I started growing Nicotiana rustica for
Mm.
several years, and I learned how to produce both a like a smokable, fermented, like properly cured tobacco leaf, and I also learned how to make tobacco paste, which I knew as ambil.
Mm.
I don't know if you're
Mm.
familiar with that word. Yeah, you okay, it
Of
sounds like
course.
you are. Yeah, and amble, that was actually my preferred way of ingesting tobacco for a couple of years. And it has been years now since I have grown it and produced it. But I know that this is one of the ways that you predominantly work with tobacco as a paste.
Hmm.
So
I do.
it'd be great to kind of introduce your way of relating and working with tobacco in this way, and then we'll also tease apart kind of the way that you kind of introduce people to tobacco in your longer apprenticeships, and we'll expand from there.
Yeah, man. I love that you've been growing it, or that you have,
Yeah.
have grown it and have cooked paste. This is, in my opinion, one of the best things you can do if you're listening to this and you are on the shamanic path, and you do want to come into a closer relationship to tobacco. Cooking it is one of the best things you can do, and I say that you have to have so much respect for this. Cooking tobacco into a paste is very poisonous.
I was
So
so
you're
mindful at the time of how much steam it was coming off because I was well aware of
Yes,
nicotine
it's toxic.
intoxication and
Yes,
poisoning, so
yes,
it was a very
yes.
serious, delicate process when I was, creating it at the time.
It is delicate and serious, and that's where the prayer comes in, because if you can ride the severity of tobacco, because again, for anyone who's listening, tobacco is not cancer causing. Tobacco is lethal when used incorrectly, right? Distinguishing that tobacco is not cancer causing. Cigarettes that have gazillions of additives and come from the industrial chemical industry, not even food companies that grow this, right? It's full on industrial companies that grow tobacco and produce cigarettes and tobacco products for the world. This is very, very sick. It's the worst way you can engage with the plant. Um, Engaging with full spectrum, clean shamanic tobacco grown in clean way is still very poisonous. And nicotine is the highest strength poison that we have found in nature. It has the highest lethality rate. So you need the smallest amount of nicotine straight into the bloodstream to kill you, above any other poison we have found in nature, any other alkaloid. Why? Well, I don't know what that's about, but it is true. Nicotine is like a scalpel, like a razor. I don't say it to scare anyone. There are ways of working with tobacco that are very safe. But when you cook tobacco, what you're doing is you're reducing all of the alkaloids in tobacco down into a resin. And then that resin is very strong. So you need very, very, very small amounts of it to have the desired effect. You're essentially microdosing a paste. And per what I was speaking about earlier, putting that paste in the stomach is a great way to teach your body how to come into a good relationship with tobacco, because you're working with the digestive organs and your body will break it down in a digestive way, essentially like you're eating food, right? Um, so we teach it in 3-month containers, or you do a diet for 3 months and you eat the paste every day for 3 months. You abstain from other medicines, you abstain from sex, masturbation, and for men, you hold your ejaculate, and you work with this internally contained season, and you bring the tobacco in every day. It's really beautiful. Again, on the physiological level, it works to really teach your digestive organs, what do I do with tobacco? It's like really integrating it into your body. Um, and then at a spiritual level, the container is set so that you can focus on prayer and the practice and the spiritual practice of doing the work with the tobacco. And I would say a lot of people really find that the quality of engaging with tobacco once a day in a 40-minute sit is incredibly supportive to sitting, to meditating. It's like a lot of people who might be interested in this work with hape in a similar way, where you take a little bit of hape and then you go into a kind of meditation, and the hape may help you ground yourself and make your nervous system more available to sitting still. And eating the paste has a similar quality, but it's a lot longer lasting because it goes into your belly and it really helps you regulate and center. Really supportive. Yeah. So ambil, to wrap that off, is traditionally cooked with a plant salt. So usually, from my understanding, in the jungle around in Colombia, they will reduce a palm tree to ash, and they will filter the ash into salt and add this back into the tobacco. And so you get this salted mixture, which has a bit of abrasion on the gums and helps balance the pH and activate the tobacco, because the tobacco is acidic, the salt is basic. Um, and with the pure mapacho paste that I cook, it's not salted. I use a little bit of ash to help activate it. And it's very purgative. I would say the ambil is less purgative because it's balanced with the salt. But the tobacco, pure raw tobacco paste is highly purgative. And we use it to cause purges as well, taken in higher doses.
Sure. When you were saying that when we ingest tobacco and then it goes straight to the liver, and the liver has this dialogue with the tobacco, and the entire body is like, what do we do with tobacco? What do you see happening across the board from all your years being involved in this work and initiating serving tobacco to many people? Like, what do you see as some of the collective answers to what the body is saying when it comes to what do we do with tobacco? And you were touching on it then in regards to the nervous system, but I feel like there's something beyond. There's absolutely something beyond just the physiological effects, and it extends into more of these etheric energy fields that we have.
So it goes into what I was just speaking about earlier with tobacco as a karmic teacher.
Yeah.
So it's like a lot of different people come to the tobacco. There's people who come because they really feel the resonance and they desire to learn from the tobacco and pray in that way. Some people come because it crosses their path and it feels in alignment, and they're there to have a new experience. And that's good as well. And then some people come because they're stuck somewhere in life. Something is really blocking the path forward. You're just in a loop, you're in a cycle, you can't get to it. You try this, you try that. And the tobacco has this quality of taking you straight into the thing. And usually that's painful. It's almost always, I've seen it as looking painful. People experience it as pain in the nervous system, maybe pain in the physical body, maybe a lot of emotional pain, spiritual pain, mental pain, cognitive pain. And the tobacco begins to help you sit in it so you can breathe through it and begin to alchemize it. And so it's a healer in that way. It takes you right into the spot that everything in you does not want to go to, because it hurts to go there, because there's a wound there that's never been fully cleaned out and healed. And some of those things can be ancestral, which is where tobacco has quite a lot of expertise working on these things in us that are so lodged and they're so deep. We don't have stories for them, that they're pre-verbal, but we're holding them somewhere in our matrix. And the tobacco can help us go into them, sit in them, feel them, and they begin to unlock and our web opens. And so that is a huge payoff in our life, right? Because we have more access of our own energy, more access to sovereignty, as well as this very potent initiatory experience of stepping straight in to the place where we're really struggling maybe, or where we're really stuck. And I watched that process mature people in a way that's profound. And so I've not seen anybody complete the 3-month tobacco diet without making a multi-year leap in spiritual maturation, which is beautiful to witness. It's very beautiful to witness. And a lot of people come back and do it again. And I have multiple people this year who did our spring tobacco diet who are coming back to do our fall tobacco diet, which starts in a month. It's all men in the fall. So yeah, some people are like, yeah, I'll take 6 months out of my life in the year, 6 months out of my year and sit with tobacco because it has that quality of maturing the soul.
Let's flag that and talk about the 3-month apprenticeship and longer apprenticeships later on. But
Yeah.
let's double click on the tobacco purging, the importance
Yeah.
of tobacco purging.
Yeah.
Tease that apart for us. And I'm also curious, you mentioned that when you ingest tobacco liquid and also the paste, I'm curious about how much of the purge happens automatically based on the amount of tobacco or the water that's consumed. And then also, can it be facilitated through manual release? Or is this pretty much an automatic process that happens?
It's a great question. There are different ways to purge with tobacco. Like enough hape will cause you to purge with tobacco, right? So if you smoke enough tobacco, it'll cause you to purge. Enough nicotine in your blood will trigger the purge. So when the most painless and effective and safe ways to administer tobacco purge are by drinking it. And so there are 2 ways to do that. You can brew tobacco water like a tea, or you can take paste or resin and reconstitute it into the water. In the latter case, it's a bit stronger in some way because you're working with essentially an earthen or solid form of tobacco that's constituted of water. So it's more like a broth. It has matter in it as opposed to a lighter liquid sun tea, which is more of an infusion. That's a bit more fast acting. The paste, when you drink it, works on your digestive system. But, for simplicity's sake, when you brew and drink tobacco, this will cause a purge. And it can take time. It can take time. The medicine may begin to take you into parts of your body that have been locked up, and it will slowly try to unlock them by getting you to allow your nervous system to come back online in that area of your body. And so that I'm talking about your physical vessel. It could be a spot in the left side of your abdomen where there's a lot of density and the tissue is chronically clenched and shut tight. And it's very physical. The tobacco may go into that area and literally try to get you to start opening it up from the inside out by you permissioning your nervous system to open back up there. And some people feel, depending on how locked they are and maybe how old they are and how much they've carried, they can feel a lot of physical pain. And it's just like a reopening of the body. And then there's a physical purge. This can clean out your digestive tract for sure from the bottom up, like the whole intestinal tract.
When you say it's a slow process, just pause on there, we'll come back. How slow are you talking? I presume or assume that you're talking about within that single session. Or can this, yeah, because I'm wondering whether people might ingest tobacco and it might take several sessions of ingesting the tobacco to actually go through a purging process. Okay, so you're talking about it
Very
happening
rare.
within the first session, and it could be slow in terms of, are we talking hours here?
Yeah, in terms of hours,
Yeah, okay.
yeah. It's possible that someone does not purge from the mouth on their first sit. I have a lot of people come to me who have never purged in ayahuasca and who have trouble purging.
People can just be so locked tight and holding on to so much that it can be really hard to surrender into that and have those bigger releases.
Yes, yes, and that was me.
Uh.
I didn't purge for something like 7 years drinking medicine, ayahuasca, tobacco, combo. Nothing could get me to purge.
Wow.
Until finally I was ready. And I just said, okay, I'm ready. Like, bring me the experience that I need. And I went and visited a tabaquera in Peru and drank her tobacco. And that was my first purge with plant medicine after 7 years of working with plant medicine.
Wow, 7 years
Yeah.
of feeling like you could get to the place where you felt resourced enough and had the capacity to go into that space.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's possible. I do
Yeah.
have people come to me, have tobacco and not purge. It's very, very rare.
Mm.
And a lot of times what will happen is somebody will come to me the first time, maybe they won't be able to purge. And then the second or third time, the tobacco will start to unlock them. And they'll start to, and I've held the hand of some people through, month, 2 month, 3 month long processes, sitting in multiple ceremonies. And I've watched them unlock after however many years, sometimes decades, where they've been so locked and the tobacco starts to unlock them. And it happens through that action of purging. So what is that? It's like, okay, reference Kundalini. What's a Kundalini awakening? You have this idea that there's a sleeping energy at your base or at your root below your sacrum, and it's your sexual energy. In my understanding, a full Kundalini activation is not etheric. It's not something that's happening just with energy. It's happening through the tissue, and your spine itself is actually extending, aligning and elongating. And so your tissue is having an electrical jolt, voltage go up the spine, through the tissue, the soft tissue, all the way up. And when you have a deep release with the tobacco, what it's doing is it's reversing the natural flow of electricity, which goes down with your digestion and gravity and out. And it flips the switch on it and it sends it up the other way. And so when you have a very deep purge, it happens from the sacrum, like from the bottom of your intestines, below your belly button, right at the bottom of your digestive tract. And it ripples all the way up through your soft tissue. There are multiple gates you have to pass through, like you do in this concept of Kundalini awakening. It's very easy in a tobacco ceremony to get through the solar plexus, which is very dense for most people. It can stop in the heart. We can do this and push it back down because it's very scary to let all this energy come up.
Yeah.
So we can push it back down, where you can get stuck here, where we lock it down from here.
Yeah.
And so I teach a kind of way of breathing and coach people through how to permission the big energy to come through. And it can be very, very powerful releases that really can affect your life.
Yeah, that's a really great and interesting way of framing it, because so much of us are used to the daily mechanisms of putting food in and all the energy is going this way from the mouth down into the body. But yeah, now that I reflect back on many, many, many purgative experiences working with ayahuasca, wachuma, kambo, that deep, deep purge that you're talking about from right at the sacral all the way up, rippling up. It's interesting to think about it in terms of this reverse energetic component, like this bioelectric mechanism, this way of unlocking and activating through the purgative process. And how, yeah, I'm thinking about the different felt sense embodied experience after having some of those deep purgatives and the feeling of openness within
Yeah.
the somatic experience. It's a real
Yeah,
thing.
it's beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And as you're suggesting, it can come in general from a strong purge, whether that's with combo, tobacco, ayahuasca, and a given number of purges.
Mhm.
Um, when you purge with tobacco, all of that openness, and you kind of can feel like a newborn baby and you feel super sensitive. The tobacco is also running through the channels of your body, and that's where it's etheric. So
Mhm.
the channels that you needle in acupuncture,
Mhm.
right? This idea of meridians in the body, energetic lines in the body. The tobacco almost coats you like an armor.
Mhm.
So there's this sense of being wide open and available and sensitive and psychically connected,
Mhm.
but also being resilient
Mhm.
and very strong. And it's very jaguar like energy where fear seems to dematerialize very fast.
Mhm. Mm. Yeah, and I know your depth of knowledge when it comes to this theme that we're talking about, when the energy is moving up through the bioelectric, biostructural, fascial tissue of the body, because of listening to a couple of your previous podcast episodes, in particular when
Mhm.
you were talking about your Neigong practices and your
Mhm.
shoulder issue and working with fascial recalibration from the inside out. And I might detail some of this in the introduction, some of your back history. So whether or not you want to get into some of that story now, but I mentioned to you when it comes to the tobacco purging that I certainly have noticed a lot of the unsafe practices, or there's certainly safety considerations and concerns. As we've mentioned, tobacco can be extremely poisonous. People have died from ingesting tobacco in traditional or indigenous type ceremonies where there's been an
Yep.
overconsumption of tobacco. So
Yep.
that
Yep.
I know that I'm not going to be the only one with these safety considerations. So it might be good to double click on some of the unsafe ceremonial practices that you notice within traditional, but then also the modern context. And we're kind of that might play into a little bit of some more of the shadow dynamics that we do see emerging as tobacco becomes more popularized within the spiritual circles. And I mean, we've mentioned harpe a couple of times throughout this conversation. That's one of the obvious ones. Sacred harpe use, which is, that's sacred masquerading as this profane addictive relationship.
Yeah. Party
Anyway, yeah,
drug.
it'd be good to hear you kind of
Yeah.
reflect on that.
Yeah. So there's a few pieces I would say. One is making sure that the body can handle the strong purge through tobacco, right? So
Mm.
what is needed? Um, the guy will not give tobacco purges to somebody who cannot walk up a few hundred feet on a hill and not feel like they're dying.
Mhm.
So you need a certain level of physical robustness.
Mhm.
You do not have to be a triathlon runner. Um, but you need a certain level of physical robustness. Your circulatory system
Mm.
needs a level of robustness. So you cannot do strong tobacco purges if you have very severe circulatory issues. But that said, there is a brother that has had open heart surgery twice that I give tobacco purges to because we have gone very, 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 very slowly.
Mhm. Mhm.
And the first ceremonies I gave him, I wouldn't give him any purgative tobacco. And finally, he did a tree diet with me,
Mm.
and I gave him a little bit more. And it was enough to cause him to have a gentle purge.
Mm.
And he started to learn how to do it in his body. So there, but that's
Oh,
it.
yeah.
That's an art practice,
Mhm.
right? That you have to learn with yourself if you come with a compromised circulatory system.
Mm.
Conversely, the tobacco is extremely healing to the circulatory system and the
Mm.
cardiovascular system when used as a medicine in this way, but needs extreme care.
Uh-huh.
So and if you treat someone who has a compromised circulatory system with heavy purgative doses of tobacco in a way that's hitting them like a sledgehammer,
Mhm.
that is where you're in massive danger zone. And so from my understanding, there have been some cases like this in the Amazon at centers where foreigners have died.
Mhm.
Essentially, people that have had compromised circulatory systems have been given overdoses of tobacco. And that's a very dangerous mix. And it's other common sense pieces around the integrity of the fascia. So people who have had recent surgeries where the fascia could tear from a strong purge, I won't serve them purgative tobacco. That said, there is a safe dose that you can have of purgative tobacco that you could probably give to a 13-year-old boy, and it wouldn't harm them. They would get ill from the tobacco, and they would vomit, and they would pass it, and they would be okay. And that's about the dose that I give to people, because you don't need a lot of tobacco to purge. And because of the disconnection to tobacco and the misunderstanding of tobacco, and probably the arrogance around tobacco and the desire to hold power around tobacco or to claim something with tobacco, people misdose it because they don't understand it and they're not really connected to it in this way. And I think some indigenous people do this too. And it's caused an image of tobacco in the jungle, I think, even amongst indigenous practitioners who are wary of it because of how much drama has been caused through deaths of foreigners at ayahuasca centers that have been misdosed. So this is about a liter. And if you were to brew a strong tea of tobacco and drink a liter of this, you would be way overdosed. Way overdosed. You need a fraction of that for a good purge. But that is something that I've seen as common practice, to give people just an enormous amount of tobacco tea that is not necessary for the body, and it's going to make you super, 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 super sick. And so I don't practice that way. I give people the minimum dose required for the effect.
And that's probably, it might be unfortunate and even scary to say that may not be the norm, because we live in this fast-paced, rapid-fire, instant gratification, give it to me now, the big fireworks extravaganza world, particularly when it comes to a lot of the sacred medicines, that a lot of practitioners are giving large doses to people because they want people to feel satiated or satisfied with the blow off the top experiences, rather than going slowly, titrating
That's because those practitioners haven't drank enough tobacco. And I really mean that. I really mean that if you're somebody who's serving ayahuasca and you're serving ayahuasca that way, go to a tabaquero or a tabaquera who's worth their salt and drink some tobacco. The tobacco is a teacher about how to carry medicines, shamanic medicines, how to be in right relationship with shamanic medicines, and how to dose shamanic medicines. So if you study tobacco and you study drinking tobacco and how much tobacco you need, if you can dose tobacco accurately, it will teach you how to dose other medicines accurately, because it's teaching this. It goes back to that poison I was talking about in nicotine being such an elite poison. It's so strong that we don't know of another poison in nature that's stronger than nicotine. It's so if you can work with that in the body, it's like, in maybe touching back to where we started, it contains that myth of tobacco being part of the architecture of creation, like an emissary of creator. So if you're studying that school of how to dose tobacco accurately, it will teach you how to be in right relation to the other medicines. But of course, we can be pompous with tobacco too. There are tons of people who use hape and who blow enormous amounts of hape into their nose and into the noses of other people. And it's addictive. It's a horrible teaching. And it has nothing to do with what that medicine is. Hape traditionally is tree medicine. It's the medicine of a strong tree, a strong master tree, ash of a tree, and the body of tobacco, right? The fire of a tree in ash, half of that, half of the pulverized tobacco, put them together, and you have this delivery mechanism for tree medicine. That's traditional hape. We're very far from that. Most people using hape have no clue what's in the hape. Yes, it's got some tobacco. Do you know what else you're shooting up with the tobacco? And do you know the plant that's being worked with alongside the tobacco? Very likely not, because it's an export from the jungle. So nobody knows those plants. If you have a relationship with the plant that you're shooting and dosing with the tobacco, there's a space for hape. I enjoy it, and hape is very beautiful and has a purpose as a medicine. But in my opinion, one needs to know the plant that is being coated with the tobacco inside the hape to develop the relationship with the hape. And tobacco is insistent on that for it to be true medicine.
Yeah, about 5, 6 years ago, 7 years ago, particularly when I was facilitating a lot of ceremonial healing processes with the frog medicine, Kambo, which I no longer do anymore, but serving hape was a component of that. But I myself stopped relating with tobacco in that way as a nasal snuff maybe 4 or 5 years ago now, because the overarching theme there was not being in right relationship, because as you were speaking to, I didn't know exactly what was in the plants, and that became more of a theme for me through living on a 14-acre property and growing all of our fruits and vegetables and living off the land in a permaculture homestead. So growing all the medicines that we needed ourselves, and then realizing that there were some that I didn't have that relationship with through growing and producing myself. So I was still importing a lot of the tobacco snuffs and the harpe. So one, I didn't know what was in them entirely. Two, there came a point in time where harpe was just completely nailing my sinus cavities in a horrible way. It was not the way for me to be working with tobacco. And I thought, if I don't have that relationship, there's no way that I can serve that to other people and be in integrity. So I severed that way of relating with tobacco. And that's when I don't think I was transitioning. I think at the same time, I was still working with tobacco in the paste, and through growing the Nicotiana rustica and going through that whole curing fermentation process myself. But a little bit of that's just a side note on some of my experience to what you were talking about. But you started talking about tree diet. There's so much more that we could talk about when it comes to tobacco. But let's start to make a transition a little bit into tree diet, since you brought it up. What are diets? Most people listening will be familiar with the traditional Amazonian dietas within the practice of curanderismo. And some people might understand that to be some of the basic restraints on diet immediately prior to drinking a medicine like ayahuasca. We're talking about the basic ayahuasca preparation here, like don't eat meat, don't drink alcohol, don't have sex, all these universal guidelines. But what we're talking about here, it's much deeper than that, which is developing a relationship with particular plants over extended periods of time. And we do that through sensitizing ourselves enough so that we can begin to pick up on the subtle energetic currents that are available to us when we ingest certain plants or trees and we're exposed to that plant in some way. And we begin to sensitize ourselves by giving very careful consideration to what information we're exposed to, which does include the elimination of many foods, interactions with people, forms of entertainment. There are environmental factors to consider, and it's the removal, the elimination of a lot of these distractions and heavier energies so that we can sensitize our sensory antenna to tune into the more subtle teachings of these plants. And some people, including yourself, have, whether or not it feels right to you to say, adapted or have expanded upon these traditional Amazonian practices to diet plants and trees. And you've been doing so outside of the South American trees. And a big focus for you, obviously, is oak, birch, and sequoia trees. So,
Mhm.
one thing that I didn't ask you though about tobacco. So, I would love for you to maybe tell the story because I'm so curious about your initiatory kind of threshold crossing into working with tobacco and then how that led to you working with trees. So, maybe you can kind of
Mm.
bridge that gap for us there and we'll get into talking about why oak, why
Mm.
birch, and why sequoia.
Well, my journey with tobacco was a long one, man. My grandmother gave me a set of pipes when I was 15.
Wow.
Yeah, a
Were
set
they
of
passed
tobacco
through
pipes.
down the family lineage
I
or you don't know?
Nothing that magical. They came out of her pawn shop.
You think go.
So, like,
Uh-huh.
yeah, she had a pawn shop in Florida, in South Florida, and somebody had pawned this set of estate pipes that, probably had 20 pipes in this case, this briefcase like pipe case. And she gave it to me at 15. And I was enamored with it. I was totally enamored with it and started buying tobacco off these online forums and these, professional clubs for tobacco for high-end European tobacco,
Mm,
and got into pipe culture,
mhm.
like boutique pipe smoking culture, and did that for a few years. I mean, that was there throughout my 20s, and then, in my 20s, I was heavily addicted to alcohol and pharmaceutical opiates, and I smoked an enormous amount of cigarettes.
Mhm.
I lived in Beijing at the time. I went through a very deep addictive period in my life,
Right.
and when I went to the Amazon for the first time, and I smelled a mapacho on my first plant diet, something took over, and I was more interested in the mapacho and the power in the tobacco than I was in the ayahuasca or the plant that I was dieting in the jungle at the time. Even though I was, I had a beautiful diet. It was my initiatory first plant diet um, in the Amazon. There was something about the tobacco that I remembered, and I remember even having these thoughts around that first year after dieting of going, this is all wrong. The tobacco is the master plant here.
Right.
Like, the tobacco is the strongest plant here, that you can do all of this through the tobacco. Whether I was right or wrong, I mean, it was a very strong force coming through me.
Mm,
And I was very sick at the time. The the way that I had degraded myself from drugs and alcohol in China for 7 years had me in a very low physical state. And I think when I went to diet the first time, I was probably 3 years into the healing journey, and had been teaching myself fasting and Neigong and breathing. And I healed a lot, but I was still very desperate for recovery. And not from the drugs, but physical recovery. It was intestinal and autoimmune,
yep.
um, and I didn't feel like the medicine I needed was in the Amazon. I kept having these dreams of, well, it started with one particular medicine tree in the desert of North America, in the Sonoran Desert, called Ocotillo. And eventually I worked up the courage to go take a tobacco pipe out into the wilderness and go diet Ocotillo.
Hmm.
And I was very far off grid in the desert. I mean, I drove my Land Cruiser into the bush
Mm,
and went and did a diet by myself. And it was difficult. It was difficult. It was frightening. Um, but I received a lot. And I received a lot in a way that was very clear. And um, I began to integrate it, and other trees called me. So at this time, I was just working with the tobacco pipe.
mm,
I was not purging. I was not working with tobacco as a purgative. somebody introduced me to tobacco paste, and one of the trees that I dieted gave me this vision of cooking her needles with the tobacco after being off grid with her for 15 or 16 nights. Was it a hallucination? I don't know. Maybe some people would say it was. It was a vision for sure. It was a very strong vision. And I did it. I went and I cooked tobacco with the Metasequoia needles, and the result was a very beautiful medicine. And I dieted on the Metasequoia through the tobacco for another 10 months, maybe. And I became very close with this tree. I went back to the Amazon to do some more dieting. I had some very difficult experiences with a teacher that I was working with, drinking very strong medicine, and it just became very clear that that was not my way. And was guided back to the States, where I continued to diet the tobacco paste. And I did another 9 months of dieting tobacco paste and dieting other trees. And I basically did a year-long diet with a few different trees and tobacco paste. And it was at the end of that year that I realized I needed to go learn how to purge, and packed down to Peru, found a teacher at Tapaquera, and had a really beautiful exchange of medicine with her, with our different forms of tobacco, and started purging with the tobacco, and did a lot of purging with it myself. And then I was at that time already serving the paste in ceremony, but I wasn't serving purgative doses. And so after beginning to purge with it myself, I started serving purgative doses. And yeah, I mean, that's a big part of how I got here, is a very unorthodox journey with the medicine. But I've dedicated my life to the path, and am very grateful for what the tobacco has brought in. And I've been in a school of learning from the plant for a long time, and purging with the medicine is a very sacred art. You can't trifle with it. It's very deep. Holding other people through it is very deep. It's a huge responsibility. But I trust the tobacco, and I trust my bond with the tobacco, and I trust my prayer. And I've seen some people go through very strong initiatory experiences purging on tree diets, but I've never seen anyone come close to harm.
Yep.
So we work in a safe way. I'm training other people how to do it. And we have a really grounded community.
Well, you mentioned Metasequoia. For our Australian folk who are listening, stick around, because Jordan, you've got your Metasequoia diet coming up in September. We'll pause that to the side for a moment first. So for anyone who's listening, we are going to talk about that. But this idea of dieting trees, geez, where do we even begin to unpack this? I mean, it's a continued unfolding from everything that we've been talking about in regards to tobacco. But I've heard you speak about the archetypal personifications of oak, birch, sequoia, tobacco.
Yeah.
So maybe we can lay some of that context and tease some of that apart.
Tobacco traditionally is the grandfather, and the Metasequoia I work with as the grandmother. And there's no traditional indigenous relation there that I know of. It's purely come through dieting the tree. It's intuitive. There's a way that tobacco and Metasequoia balance each other that I find incredibly strange and uncanny, where if you cook the tobacco by itself, it's extremely purgative. If you cook the tobacco with Metasequoia, it's about 1000% less purgative.
Hmm.
I mean, it's huge. It's a huge difference. It's a huge difference. It's so calm with the metasequoia, and it looks the same. It smells the same.
Mhm.
It's just the metasequoia has been infused alongside the tobacco, and she has such a grandmother energy. It balances the tobacco out. That's the best explanation I've got, albeit a primitive one. And then oak and birch are father and mother, and those are traditional all over the world. They're both druidic trees, but they're shamanic trees throughout Siberia, throughout Japan, Korea, China, Tibet. And then there's shamanic trees throughout the Americas as well. And there's traditional inscriptions of oak from the Sioux that say that there's a lightning sky god within the oak. And then you go over to Rome and they're like, yeah, Jupiter lives in the oak. And you go over to Greece and they're like, yeah, Zeus lives in the oak. And you go over to Scandinavia and they're like, Thor lives in the oak. And you go over to like the tribal Jews of that time in Israel and they're like, yeah, Yahweh lives in the oak. And there's a very pan-cultural and ancient ascription to the archetype of the lightning sky god as the oak tree. And my opinion, take it or leave it, is that the lightning sky god figure around the world, the god figure, which is popularized by Yahweh, but is pan-cultural, comes from human reliance on the oak in the Northern Hemisphere. That's thousands and thousands and thousands of years of humans eating acorns and relying on acorns. So that segues into what is a tree diet. But before that, birch mother, right? And that comes, again, I don't want to say it's universal, but anywhere you find the birch, you find this very mother-like ascription to the birch tree, particularly the northern white or silver birches. And what is it? Berkana in the Norse runes is the birch, and it means the great mother. So great mother, Berkana, birch. And it's the same in the Druidic or the Celtic Ogham. Brecta, I want to say.
Okay.
And it's birch, right? But that's great mother. It's the rune for great mother, the Ogham for great mother. So very deep kind of cross between oak and birch. And they grow together in many places, and they do have this balanced energy, as tobacco and metasequoia seem to have this balanced energy. But going back to eating trees, eating acorns, being able to connect to the energy of a tree, and then all over the world, you have this vision of a god, a kind of sky god, this father sky god that's coming out of all these different cultures. And of course, anthropology, in the way that it looks at things structurally, would say there was a root culture that came up with this idea that is very old, and it disseminated it all over the place. In the shamanic perspective or the indigenous perspective, the earth-bound perspective, you might say, no, that's not how it works. There is a tree species, or there are these gates or doors into earth consciousness, and those doors are all over the world, and those doors go to the same place in earth consciousness, and they speak of the same thing. And so cultures all over the world get the same information. And I am more inclined to this way of looking at things, that all over the world, cultures in the Northern Hemisphere relied very heavily on oaks, essentially eating and living on oaks, dieting oaks as part of their livelihood. Acorn culture was huge before agriculture. And they're still consumed in some places, but all over the world, we found the tools for processing acorns. We found caches of acorns that are thousands of years old. all over the world. So it's like well known. People relied on acorns like pre-Bronze Age.
Mhm.
Um,
I'm thinking about
and then, yeah,
the
yeah.
idea of dieting certain plants or trees, particularly from the Amazonian curanderismo context, and how that can seem like an esoteric or a mystical or a spiritual thing. But from what you're saying, yes, that can be a component to it, but it's just a very real human thing. It's a relationship that we've had with certain
It's
plants and
primal.
trees from day dot.
It's important to remember that we're all Earth native.
Mhm.
In that way, we come from here, we're going to die here, our body's going to go back. There is, in that way, no indigenous, non-indigenous. I do believe that indigenous cultures, as we see them as separate from the Western colonial system, carry a kind of guardianship over a type of knowledge that is vital, and that needs to be acknowledged. But in the total human scope of things, we are all the same. We all come from the earth. We all die. We all go back to the earth. We all have bodies. We all eat of the earth, right? We all come from our mother. So in that way, it's good to dispel some of the mysticism and need to ground things, right? And what are we grounded in? Like, we need to ground it in good practice, right? Always. That life needs to be grounded in good approaches to living. So tree diets in that way are a set of ritual instructions or protocols. And I did learn some of the protocols in a lineage in the jungle. And then I spent many years dieting alone in the wilderness of North America, slowly modifying those protocols to suit a way of dieting that is not relying on any particular cosmology or any particular traditional set of beliefs or mysticism in order to be effective.
And then thinking about this long-standing relationship that we've had, the trees, there's this idea of trees being the elders. And you're speaking about this pan-cultural kind of earth-based cosmology that we can all have access to. And when we do start developing a relationship with trees, it would make sense then that you're talking about trees being a portal into this deeper earth-based understanding. And the trees have this particular energetic transmission that can become available to us. You might want to take that somewhere else, or in a particular way, but I have heard you speak about the metasequoia tree, and the genetic profile of this tree, the dawn redwood, being unchanged for millions upon millions of years. And when I heard you speak about that, that's such a great story, and it might be nice to unravel that and then start to get into how trees can teach us on these multiple levels: physical, emotional, energetic, spiritual, what types of healing, all that kind of stuff.
I think it's a good time to say that tree dieting in its essence is a tantric practice. So it's a practice, and it's a sexual practice in that way. You're working with sex energy in its pure form. It's not erotic. You're not working with eros, but you are working with the purity of your life energy and the purity of the life energy of a plant, and you're melding into one stream. In that way, you're merging. So a tree diet is not that different than, in a way, having sex. Sex is very erotic. Tree diets are not erotic. But you're melding your life stream in the way you do when you have sex. And when you have sex, if you are spiritually aware and are open, you're exchanging deep information with the person you are hopefully making love to. Even if you're not making love and you're just having the most carnal sexual experience possible, you're exchanging tons of information.
Mm-hmm.
And that is also happening when you do a diet. And so the tree is also benefiting from the diet in the same way lovemaking benefits both people. And it feeds the trees at a soul level for humans to come and to do a practice like this. And I've started to actually shift my bias in that direction and away from, it's not that we aren't going to the elders to learn. We are. That is true. And I guess you could say, as a man on a mission, I've started to shift my bias towards going to water the trees. And that's what we're doing when we diet.
Sure.
And we're feeding the web of trees, and we're feeding the web of forests, and we're feeding the web of intelligence in nature to go drink from them. We're actually watering them. And yet they water us. And that experience is incredibly healing. It plugs us into a sense of meaning that goes far beyond what our materialist, consumerist banking structure has created. And everybody's longing for that at some level. That's why we're numbing ourselves or medicating ourselves. And that's where so much of our illnesses are coming from. It's coming from a deep and soul crushing feeling of disconnection, and that there's nowhere to be safe or to exist or to actually breathe and just lay out on our existence and feel like we can take up space on this earth and belong on this earth, because we've been so cut off from natural connection to the grid, to the web, to the matrix, the actual matrix. The matrix of life, the cosmic matrix, the cosmic web. And trees are a door to that. They are ancient ones propping it up. They are propping up the biomatrix on Earth. And so connecting to that is healing, but also it needs us as part of it. We are part of the web. And so us returning to it puts something in its right place. And I'm watching it activate trees, and I'm watching it activate PowerPoints. And it's honestly blowing my mind, and it's really shifted my sense of importance away from my own needs being met and more towards, we have a role to play in helping restore balance and give back to the web by connecting to it, as you could say, as students, but really just as human beings, just being what we are.
Yeah, that's such an important point that you add there, because it can be so easy to ask, what do the trees have to teach us across all these multiple levels of what kind of healing might we receive from the trees? What can I get from dieting with the trees without remembering to consider that ever important relationship of reciprocity? What is it that I'm offering in return? That's so crucial when it comes to all of this work.
You offer your heart and your soul and yourself, right? And that's prayer. It's like, that's weaving back prayer. You open yourself fully to be seen, to be honest, to be true, to be present, and to be present with, or to walk with, or to abide with. And that's all that needs to be done. It's like we're holding hands for a short period of time. Trees are doomed, humans are doomed. On a long enough time scale, the earth is doomed. So there's nothing to save. It's like, what are we doing here in the time that we're here? Let's commune. And if we can, make the web of life stronger and more robust through our communion and our connection. It's not much more than that. Now, at a practical level, what do the trees have to teach? A lot. A lot. They're archives, man. They're libraries. And the metasequoia you mentioned, this is a tree that evolved in the late Cretaceous period, literally when dinosaurs were chilling at the North Pole. It just sounds absurd, but like, the North Pole had land there. It was a swamp, and Metasequoia was the dominant canopy tree at the North Pole. Magnetic North, if you can believe such a thing. The tree, as literally the Earth starts to shift its plates, because this is like 60 to 80 million years ago, and the Earth starts to shift its plates, the glacial ice cap forms up there. The tree is walking south in every direction around the globe. We found it on all the continents in the Northern Hemisphere. It goes extinct in Europe, North America. We find it in China in the 1940s. And the fossils that we knew about and have found all over the world in the Northern Hemisphere match the genetic information of the living tree in a way that it appears to have not been evolving for 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 million years. And that's extremely rare. It's a biological fact about this tree that is dazzling, and it's dazzling and such. There's no explanation for it. It seems to defy life. The current theory of evolution would be something like when a species stops evolving, it loses its fitness, its evolutionary fitness. It can no longer maintain its niche, and it goes extinct. So what would that mean? It would mean the tree is something like a master of the evolutionary game and is like sticking around as a bodhisattva or something. It like chose not to ascend. When we found it, there was something like 40, 50, 60 of them in the wilderness, less than 100. We found them in one grove in China, one little grove. And so it came that close to extinction. And yeah, it's a profound evolutionary marvel. Like, what does it have to teach? I don't know. Come diet. Ask her. She has so much to share and so much to say. And I've dieted with this tree a lot. She's like one of my masters. But I don't know all of what she has to teach and all of what she has to share. She continues to teach me and baffle me. But one thing that I can say is that she really helps human beings tune into the long vision of our life path. So looking past little cycles and looking over epochs, which can be hard for us to connect to because we're so involved in our current experience from our current sense of maturity or wisdom. And she helps us tap into a wisdom that's much bigger than that and helps us look at our life from a transcendental place. And it's really, really profound.
It stirs the imagination of the potential of what such a being could impart to us and what kind of relationship that might be, of inviting that particular tree into our bodies that has seemingly remained unchanged for millions upon millions of years. We talked about the safety profile of tobacco. I know that there will be those that are scientifically minded or have a skeptical mental frame of approaching things. So do we know much about the safety profile of these trees? Do we know how the bark tannins are affecting the body? Do we know what compounds and how the compounds in oak, birch, sequoia might interact with our bodies, both negatively and positively?
No, I haven't spent a lot of time researching it, honestly. A little bit. What I do know is that through dieting them, you can learn pretty fast how much, I guess, if you're sensitive and connected, how much to have, how much not to have. what I'll say is that birch is used as a tonic all over the world and has been for gazillions of years. And you can drink a lot of birch. There's nothing poisonous
I
in the
make my
birch. They're
activated
almost.
charcoal out of birch trees.
Do you guys have them down there?
Yeah, we do.
Well, yeah, there's nothing poisonous in the birches. They're innocuous. And the betulin, the main alkaloid or compound found in birch, is under heavy research as a cancer cure. Metasequoia, the research that has been done on her, she's not, they discovered the tree in the 40s. But the research that's been done, I want to say primarily in China and Japan on Metasequoia, has also been around isolating certain compounds in the Metasequoia for anti-cancer treatment. I'm sure this is a big part of what's driving research into tree compounds. And then oak is tannic. So oak, I make pretty light brews of tea, honestly. And I'm of the opinion that a strong tree diet has nothing to do, literally nothing to do with how much tea you drink. You can drink an enormous amount of oversteeped bark tea and not do a tree diet at all. You can be totally disconnected. And so there is a shamanic art of opening up the life stream or the soul stream of the tree. That happens from going to the living tree itself and having a relationship with the tree and learning how to communicate with the tree and building a relationship with the tree. And then I bring that relationship to my students, my friends, and everyone who comes to do this work, and utilize that relationship to help them connect and help bridge that gap. And the tea in that way serves as almost like a way to attune, like a tuning fork. So you can tune your body to the frequency of the tree. But you could do a diet without drinking any tea. But you can't do a diet without connecting to the soul of the tree. And the tea is not the soul of the tree. So you can miss that. It can be really easily missed. It's not enough to just drink tree bark tea.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned the tree bark. Is that the predominant part of the tree that you use in your diets? Because, of course, there's many different
Typically.
parts. There's the outer bark, the inner bark, the leaves. And then I'm curious about why those particular parts of the tree. Like, what is it about those particular parts of the tree that they're more often used rather than the leaves or the roots?
You can use roots, but the inner bark is where the water of the tree is running. So it's where it's passing all of its compounds and its medicine. So there is an herbal effect to gather this part of the tree. So you know what I said before about the tea being inconsequential to a diet. There's truth to that, but it doesn't mean that the tea isn't powerful. You are still getting herbal medicine by drinking the inner bark, because that's where all of the herbal compounds of the tree are. And yes, you could overdose it. None of it's poisonous. Metasequoia, oak, and birch, none of them are poisonous. If you drank way too much of it, it would dry you out. It's tannic. It might make you constipated or something. But I don't give people enough to cause this kind of effect. Maybe a super sensitive person might experience that, and then we just radically reduce the dosage of tea. But it's not toxic. But yeah, you could drink the leaves. The leaves would be very mild and would help you connect. They don't have much medicine in them necessarily. Some trees do, like olive leaves have a huge amount of medicine in them. But like as do eucalyptus leaves, right? There's a ton of oils in them that can be utilized. Acorns from oak trees can be used. Catechins can be used. Galls from oak trees can be used, which are like abscesses that form in the tree around bugs. There's a lot of aspects of the tree that have medicine, but the easiest and most reliable to harvest is the inner bark, and it's where most of the herbal medicine in the tree is.
Yeah, I mentioned to you that I dieted sequoia sempervirens, the coastal redwood. This is going back maybe, well, it's hard to know, maybe 6, 7, 8 years ago or something like this. And we have a couple of forests here in Victoria, plantations. Can't remember when they were planted, but some of these, I mean, they're nothing like the trees that I suspect you'd see in North America because I haven't been there yet.
Mm. Mm.
Still mighty trees. And I went there not knowing which parts of the tree that I should diet, but I just went and sat in there for a day and allowed myself to become sensitive enough to feel like what I received was the tree just guiding me in a very, very simple way.
Sure.
And I harvested a little bit of the outer bark and the inner bark, and I just made a very, very, I was going to say bland tea, but bland is not the right word, but not a very strong tea. It was a very weak tea. And over the course of a couple of weeks, I was drinking that. And one of the first things I noticed was actually a clearing out or a passing of mucus that was in my intestines. And one of the great teachings from that particular tree, without getting into it too in depth, was a great straightening of myself, straightening on the path, and also clarification of vision. Not
Yep.
necessarily in this grandiose way, in a very subtle kind of way, but a clarification and a straightening of the path. But there's something to say, like what we were speaking to about tobacco, when it comes to sound guidance, appropriate preparation, ritual approach, because while the safety profile might be fine for a lot of these trees, there are still psychological and spiritual risks that people might need to that is important to consider in dieting a tree, because I've heard you speak about there's these bioelectric qualities of the trees and how these
Sure.
qualities can interact with the human nervous system. And if we are not, if we don't have the capacity to hold that energy, it can catalyze an excessive amount of electric charge, which could be overstimulating, one, for the nervous system, and then even quite dangerous, which could lead to all kinds of challenges when it comes to the experience itself, but then also the integration process down the road.
Big time.
Mm.
Yeah, big time. And now and again, somebody will get a huge download of electrical energy in a diet.
Mhm.
It's fairly rare, but it will happen from time to time. And those are totally initiatory experiences for the individual.
Mm.
And that's definitely in my field. I've been shocked by trees multiple times, and um, it's something that one has to be careful of going to wild trees and dieting them,
Mhm.
because the trees can deliver huge amount of energy into the system, especially if you have enough aptitude to connect with them in a deep way and to kind of wake them up or disturb them, if you want to say it like that. But they have immune systems too, right? We tend to look at nature in this way through shamanism with a kind of mysticism that everything is like a Disneyland for us to go connect with and have mystical experience.
Mhm.
And it's not like that. Nature is violent and vicious as well, right? And trees have immune systems. And some trees, not all trees, are ornery and armored and protective and testy and can be very finicky in the way they teach. And it's a gift if you get this kind of teaching from a tree. I believe that. That's how I approach this. If you get this kind of teaching from a tree, it's a gift. But trying to navigate that on your own can be hugely challenging. It can put you in very deep water very fast. Because you've opened this kind of unseen tether to the spirit of a tree that's now influencing and interacting with your body and your field. And that's pretty far-fetched for a lot of people to think about and consider. That is the realm we work in with master tree diets. Um, again, I don't overly focus on preparation of the tea. There are traditions in the jungle, like many of them, that will give you literally a teacup or 2 ounces of tea,
Right.
because it's not necessary to have a lot of it.
Mm-hmm.
You need the tea to connect. And once you connect, the spirit of the tree starts teaching in the field. And so it's like we've opened up a web through the tobacco, and the tree spirit is actually the one doing the teaching. It's not necessarily coming to the tea. That's a part of it.
Mm-hmm.
There's an intelligence in the brew,
Mm-hmm.
but it's a minor part of the diet.
Mm.
So, and there's a mystery there, this interplay between the physical substrate and the electrical teaching
Mhm.
that's coming from the web of the trees.
Mhm.
So, but yes, it can be psychologically, there's a psychological risk. This is a very sober legal medicine. And I believe that sober aspect is a hedge against the risk involved. In a way, it is a grounding factor that minimizes the risk. It makes the work safe, and there is a risk.
Yeah.
There's a risk of upsetting your system. There's a
Mhm.
risk of unbalancing yourself. There's a risk of pushing yourself too far, or having an experience with a huge transmission from a tree that brings you into a state that's going to take time to integrate. And I have seen it, and I see it every few months.
Mhm. Yeah, that's the thing about initiation business. And I've spoken to this briefly. I was speaking to it with a friend just the other day that I don't hold safe spaces. I can't guarantee that. We can mitigate risks as much as possible, but when it comes to initiation business, risks are always going to be part of the equation. So while I can't guarantee a safe space because there's so many factors in terms of other people coming into a space and saying things or doing things, acting in a certain way, or just energies within the container triggering certain psychological, emotional, nervous system kind of predispositions that you can't fully guarantee safety, but I can facilitate supported spaces to the best of my ability while mitigating a lot of those risks as best as possible.
Yeah.
But so it is in initiation business. And I wonder about this. Like we're clearly talking about initiatory pathways to healing, high consciousness, personal empowerment, revelation through nature. There's lots of different ways that we can frame it. And I'm wondering if you're thinking about or reflecting on, mulling over anything in particular when it comes to this body of work that you're carving out in regards to initiation and then your role in these initiatory pathways.
Thank you. That's a beautiful question, man. I feel more careful to answer this than any of your prior questions or anything we've spoken about up to this point. There's an aspect of the work that is done in the unseen and needs to stay there until individuals can perceive it. There's a quality of the shamanic art that is not translatable. And like I will try in many instances, and many others will try in many instances to bridge and to create language around these things, and we should. And then in terms of my practice, which is so alive and active right now, I feel limited in what I can actually say about initiatory experience. What I can say is that I believe first and foremost in safety and care for people. And I will stay up all night next to somebody if I have to. I have no problem like going the distance with people who are committing themselves to the work. And that is my role, is to walk alongside people and make sure that we're going as deeply as possible in a way that is as safe as possible. Mm-hmm.
There's certainly a lot more that we could talk about when it comes to tree diets. But as you say, if anyone's interested in tree diets, there is no substitute for that direct revelation, that experiential knowledge, because we can wax lyrical and get as conceptual as we want about it. But just come and diet the trees. I don't know why, but I had the image of the tree meme. Like
Which one?
There's a couple of them. Like, a lot of us will be familiar with the meme where it says like, "Sorry, I can't go out. I'm busy," and the images of like like the plant of like them being with or talking with the tree, and then there's the classic
totally.
drawings of like the human like exchanging energy with the tree in the
Yeah,
circular or the toroidal field, and a lot of us get it. Yeah, and we might laugh or smile at the memes, but then I actually wonder how many of us are actually putting in that practice to develop our relationship with the natural world. So, I mean, to begin rounding it out, like, is there any kind of encouragement to get out there and connect with the trees as our shamanic, animistic ancestors once did? Like, if someone were to want to go out and sit with the tree, whether it's after listening to this conversation immediately or in the weeks to come, like even just for a few moments, like what would you invite them to ask or listen for?
It's a great question. And it is as simple as going to trees and talking to them. And so can you open yourself to that? It's like, can you open yourself to talking to a tree and trusting what you hear? And if you feel like you hear nothing, then sit in silence. Then sit in silence with a tree and see what you can feel. If you can't hear, see what you can feel. Right, and if you can't feel it, maybe you can see it. Maybe you can see it on the inside. Maybe you can see the vision. It's really about opening up your psychic sensitivity and then making friends with another species that we evolved out of, and that literally our primitive primate ancestors lived in. Humans very likely grew up out of trees, meaning they probably told chimps to stand up straight and put their spines upright and put their skulls towards the sky instead of walking on all fours. So like, our relationship with these beings is so deep and so old, and the little hairy crust on top of modern disconnection is so thin. It's so paper thin. It's wafer thin. It's like we need a strong wind to blow and the whole thing's going to crack. And what are we going to be left with? We're going to have to remember what we are and where we come from and how to communicate that way. So you can do that just by going into your yard or going into the local park and going to a tree that looks beautiful to you or that looks wise to you, putting your hands on it, bringing a gift. Trees are very interesting creatures. They love flattery. It's like, I am a believer that trees have egos and trees have a self-image in a way, and they are self-aware beings. And they like to be honored by human beings. They really do. There is a sacred relationship where they know we are aware of them and they know we know about them, and they like to be included in our world and in our worldview and in our cosmology. And so if you may find that you can build a relationship with a tree very easily, and you may find that it's not actually that far out of reach, that something organic and alive and very primitive takes over, and you may find yourself in a friendship with a tree in a very unique way that that lights up your heart and brings value to your life and a lot of joy.
Yeah, that's beautiful, mate. Programs, upcoming programs. Now, there's a bit of an even spread of listeners, viewers, audience that tune into this podcast between Australia, America, and the UK. So, with that reference point, I know you've got some stuff coming up.
Yeah, might be in all the places. If you're in Austin, Texas, we have a men's tobacco apprenticeship that comes up August 22nd to November 21st. If you're not in Austin, Texas, you can still join, but there are 8 ceremonies, and that would include flying to Austin 4 times, once per month, to do the ceremony. So it's 2 nights of ceremony on every new moon, opening, second set, third set, closing. And then we're going to be in Australia, in the Gold Coast hinterland outside of Mullumbimby, giving diets with the Metasequoia, which we talked about a little bit. That's September 11th to 19th. What's after that? We're in upstate New York, giving diets with the white birch outside of Woodstock from October 27th to November 4th. And then we are in Ireland, in Cork, County Cork, Southern Ireland, from November 29th to December 7th. And that's going to be with Irish oak. So we have tobacco, sequoia, oak, birch, all coming up of different continents.
Cool. That's all happening. treediets.com. That's one of the places that people can get in touch.
You can go to treediets.com. sacredtreekeepers.com is where I've got most of our activity. It's a members community that you can also join. It's $40 a month, and we do 2 community calls a month, and we do breath work. So I teach a Taoist lineage of breathing called primordial breath or embryonic breathing, and we work in that space twice a month. And there's a practice library in there for people who are actively practicing it. So
Nice.
It's what I teach throughout the diets and the apprenticeships for grounding the plant medicine. So you can plug into that at sacredtreekeepers.com.
And then you're on Instagram as well, Mockingbird, but it's spelled MKNBRD, right?
You got it,
Yeah,
man.
yeah, nice.
Yeah,
Okay.
Mockingbird, MKNBRD.
Awesome. Okay. As we tie a bow on this one, is there anything that we haven't touched upon that you might want to leave us with? I mean, there's so much.
Life's a gift, man. We live in a playground. Enjoy it. Be happy. Walk in joy. Live your life. Create. Make beauty.
Boom. That's it. Thanks, brother.
Thank you so much, man. I enjoyed the chat.
Yeah, me too.